If you had to pick just one event that completely remade the United States in the 20th century, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better answer than World War II. It wasn't just about foreign policy. It changed American society from the inside out. It ended the Great Depression, created a whole new world order, and really set the stage for the fights for freedom that would define the next several decades. So let's dive in and see how this incredible pivot happened. It all began with this single unforgettable line. See, for most Americans, the wars happening over in Europe and Asia, they felt like someone else's problem. The country was fiercely isolationist, absolutely determined not to get dragged into another world war. But on a quiet Sunday morning in Hawaii, all of that changed in a flash. The shock of the Pearl Harbor attack was total. And with these words, President Roosevelt captured the feeling of a nation that was suddenly and violently pushed onto the world stage. And it all happened so fast, it's almost hard to believe. In just 4 days, the United States went from being officially neutral to being a key player in a war spanning the entire globe. First, the attack on December 7th. The very next day, a declaration of war on Japan. And then, boom, by the 11th, Germany and Italy declare war on the US. There was absolutely no going back. The sleeping giant, as they called it, was wide awake. Now, to really get a sense of how massive this change was, we have to remember what America was like right before the war. The country was looking inward, still trying to pull itself out of the Great Depression, and just deeply suspicious of getting involved in any foreign problems. And look, this wasn't just some popular opinion. It was literally the law of the land. These neutrality acts flat out banned selling weapons or lending money to any country at war. The memory of World War I was still raw, and a lot of people believed the U.S. had been suckered into that war by big banks and weapons makers. The mood of the country was crystal clear: never again. But the attack on Pearl Harbor just vaporized that feeling overnight. And what came next? Well, it was one of the biggest, fastest mobilizations in history. A complete transformation of the American home front. And what you're looking at here is huge. This is basically the official end of the Great Depression. The war needed a mind-boggling amount of stuff: planes, ships, tanks, you name it. The government stepped in and guaranteed profits for companies that switched to war production, and the economy just roared back to life. I mean, look at that. Corporate profits nearly doubled in only 4 years. So, with 16 million men going off to fight, somebody had to build all that equipment, right? Well, Rosie the Riveter became this powerful symbol of a massive social shift. Millions of women stepped into jobs in factories and defense plants, doing work that had always been considered men's work. By 1943, women actually made up most of the workers in the American aircraft industry. And that taste of economic independence, yeah, that would change things for good. But this picture of perfect national unity, it had some serious cracks. Underneath all the patriotism, deep racial tensions were boiling over. The government, paranoid about spies, rounded up 120,000 people of Japanese descent, most of them American citizens, and forced them into internment camps. As people moved to cities for defense jobs, competition for things like housing led to violent race riots. And even as they fought for their country overseas, Black soldiers, Hispanic soldiers, and other soldiers of color served in segregated units. This glaring contradiction gave birth to a powerful new movement. The African American community rallied behind what they called the WWII campaign. The logic was simple and just inescapable, right? How can America be fighting for freedom all over the world while denying it to its own citizens at home? This campaign planted the seeds for the modern civil rights movement, connecting that global fight against fascism directly to the fight for equality right here. So when the war finally ended, it didn't lead to some new era of global peace. Not at all. Instead, it left two giants standing: the United States and the Soviet Union. And their alliance, which was really just based on having a common enemy, fell apart almost immediately, revealing two totally different visions for the world. And here's the core of the conflict. The U.S., now the world's biggest economic and military power, wanted a world with free trade and open markets. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, had been absolutely devastated by the war and was determined to create a buffer zone of friendly states in Eastern Europe to protect itself from another invasion. These two goals, they were on a collision course. The American response to this was a new strategy called containment. A diplomat named George Kennan basically argued that the Soviet system was naturally expansionist, and the only way to deal with it was for the U.S. to apply firm, constant pressure to keep it from spreading. This single idea became the bedrock of American foreign policy for the next 40 years. The Truman Doctrine is what put containment into practice. When Britain couldn't afford to support the governments of Greece and Turkey against communist rebels anymore, the U.S. stepped in with hundreds of millions of dollars in aid. This set a huge precedent. America was now basically committed to acting as the world's policeman against the spread of communism. And this new role in the world had a really strange effect back home. It created this paradox in the 1950s. It was a time of incredible wealth and prosperity, but also a time of deep, constant fear. On the one hand, the American dream suddenly seemed real for millions. The GI Bill gave returning veterans benefits like low-interest mortgages and money for college. This fueled a massive middle-class boom and the explosion of the suburbs. I mean, think about that jump in homeownership. It's a fundamental change in how millions of Americans were living their day-to-day lives. But on the other hand, there was this: living every day under the shadow of the atomic bomb. This quote is from a real government pamphlet, and it just shows you the chilling reality of the Cold War. While families were out buying new houses and cars, their kids were at school practicing duck and cover drills. That fear, that paranoia, it was everywhere. And that paranoia had a face: Senator Joseph McCarthy. He tapped into that national fear of communism and launched what was basically a witch hunt. He held these televised hearings, accusing everyone from government officials to Hollywood actors of being disloyal. This Red Scare created a toxic climate of suspicion, where just being accused could ruin your entire life. But even in this era of conformity, that double V fight for freedom was building steam. The fight against communism around the world actually gave civil rights activists a powerful new weapon. How, they asked, could America call itself the leader of the free world while it was still practicing segregation at home? The NAACP, led by the brilliant lawyer Thurgood Marshall, came up with a master plan. They didn't just attack segregation head-on. Instead, as you can see here, they chipped away at it piece by piece in the courts. They won cases about buses, then housing, then law schools, building legal precedent step by step. All of this led to the final crushing blow, the landmark 1954 decision in Brown v. Board of Education, which finally made separate but equal in schools unconstitutional. Of course, winning in the Supreme Court was one thing. Making it a reality was something else entirely. The crisis in Little Rock, Arkansas showed that perfectly. The governor actually used the National Guard to stop 9 black students from entering their high school. It became an international incident, and President Eisenhower had to send in the 101st Airborne to enforce federal law and protect those kids. It was a dramatic showdown between state and federal power, all playing out on the national news. And at the very same time, a totally new kind of protest was taking shape. After Rosa Parks' courageous act of defiance, the entire black community of Montgomery, Alabama, organized a massive boycott of the city's segregated buses. It lasted for 381 days. Think about that. 40,000 people finding another way to get to work every single day. This incredible campaign of nonviolent resistance, led by a young minister named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., became the new, powerful blueprint for the movement. So all of this leaves us with a really big question. World War II definitely forged a new America, a global superpower with a level of prosperity that would have been unimaginable just a decade before. But it also exposed the nation's deepest contradictions, and it kicked off a battle for the soul of America that's still going on. The legacy of that great pivot is all around us, both in the incredible opportunities we have and in the fights that are still left to win.